Sumer, the Maya, and Norse Scandinavia never met. Oceans and millennia kept them completely sealed from one another, and yet each one built a dedicated place of reverence for the same kind of God, one who held hidden knowledge, governed destruction, and demanded something that wasn't quite called worship. What did they all know that we've stopped asking about? Let me start with Sumer, because that's where the written record begins, and the written record is already too specific to ignore. Around 2500 BCE, Sumerian scribes were pressing cuneiform into clay tablets describing Nergal, god of plague, god of war, lord of the underworld. His iconography wasn't abstract. He carried a double lion-headed mace, a weapon, not a scepter. And his association with the sun wasn't the life-giving dawn that most solar gods claimed. Nergal was the lord of the underworld, and his destructive aspect encompassed plague, war, and the kind of death that came from the scorching heat of summer, though his celestial association was not with the sun itself, but with the planet Mars, making him a god of war, plague, and death all at once. The one that desiccates crops and spreads disease. The Sumerians looked at the most powerful force in their sky and decided part of it belonged to the god of death. That's a specific theological choice. It tells you something about what they thought power actually was. Move the map west to Egypt. Set, god of chaos, storms, and the desert, is the one most people remember as the villain of the Osiris myth. But here's what that framing misses. Set was never fully suppressed. During the 19th and 20th dynasties, roughly 1292 to 1077 BCE, Set worship didn't just survive, it peaked. Pharaohs took his name into their own. Seti I, Setnakta. The state didn't eliminate the god of chaos, the state adopted him. And what did Set govern beyond chaos? Hidden knowledge. The kind of knowledge that unmade things. The Egyptians, who built more lasting monuments than almost any culture in history, apparently decided you couldn't afford to ignore the god who knew how to unmake them. Now pivot east, further east than most people follow this thread. The Rig Veda, composed somewhere between approximately 1700 and 1100 BCE, though scholarly estimates for the core hymns cluster around 1500 to 1200 BCE, describes Rudra long before the more familiar Shiva consolidates those attributes. Rudra is the howler, the stormbringer. He is explicitly called both the destroyer and the one who holds remedies. Medical knowledge, hidden knowledge, the kind you'd only need if something had already gone terribly wrong. He is feared and propitiated in the same breath. The Vedic priests didn't pray to Rudra the way they prayed to Agni or Indra. They prayed to him the way you'd speak carefully around someone who could hear everything and forgave nothing. 3 civilizations, 3 gods. And when you lay the attributes side by side, the overlap is too precise to be comfortable. All 3 govern death. All 3 hold a category of knowledge that ordinary people weren't supposed to access. Nergal's dominion over the boundary between the living and the dead. Set's mastery of the forces that unmake order. Rudra's hidden remedies that implied a hidden understanding of destruction itself. And all 3 demanded something that functioned like worship without ever being called that cleanly. Propitiation. Appeasement. The ritual acknowledgement that this force existed and was watching. The academic explanation is cultural diffusion, ideas traveling trade routes, shared human psychology producing similar symbols. It's a reasonable first answer, and it deserves a fair hearing. Sumer and the Vedic tradition do share plausible contact corridors through ancient Persia and the Indus Valley. But the timing doesn't hold up the way diffusion requires. Rudra appears in texts that predate the peak of Sumerian influence on those eastern corridors, and the iconographic matches are too specific. The lion, the midsummer death sun, the hidden knowledge, to arrive independently through vague cultural osmosis. Osmosis blurs. This didn't blur. It sharpened across three completely separate traditions. So here's the question I'd genuinely like you to sit with, and I'd like to see your answer in the comments. Does a pattern this precise, across three civilizations with no confirmed shared origin, feel like coincidence to you? Because it doesn't to me. And what I haven't told you yet is that the same pattern then appears on the other side of an ocean that, by every account we have, no one crossed. Set, Nergal, Rudra. 3 gods, 3 continents, 0 confirmed contact. Does that read as coincidence to you? Or does something about the precision of the overlap change the answer? Drop your answer in the comments below, because the pattern doesn't stop there. It crosses an ocean next. Now let me cross the ocean, the pattern continues. The same pattern that held for Nergal, Set, and Rudra now crosses an ocean that no one, by any account we have, actually crossed. Start with Tezcatlipoca. Not the Aztec version first, because the Aztec version is already the end of a very long road. Iconographic parallels suggest the figure's roots may trace to earlier Mesoamerican traditions, possibly including the Olmec and Maya, with the Olmec civilization active from roughly 1200 BCE onward, though scholars remain divided on the directness of this lineage. Some scholars argue that iconographic parallels suggest the same figure, a smoking mirror deity, may appear in both classic Maya and Olmec symbolic traditions, though this identification remains debated among archaeologists and art historians. That means the idea survived roughly 3,000 years of empire collapse, conquest, and cultural replacement before the Aztecs absorbed it. Ideas that survive 3,000 years of civilizational churn are not surviving by accident. Something kept pulling this particular figure back to the center. And what was that figure? In Nahuatl, Tezcatlipoca meant smoking mirror, a name that referred to the obsidian mirrors the Aztecs used during ceremonial divination. Depictions of Tezcatlipoca frequently replaced one of his feet with an obsidian mirror. That detail is not decorative. The mirror allowed him to see all human thoughts and all human actions. He was not a god of war in the way Ares was a god of war, a brute force with a domain. He was a god of surveillance, of knowing what shouldn't be known, of seeing through the surface of things into the structure beneath. Several of his alternative names, Titlacahuan and Ipalni-Molani, refer to his status among the Aztecs, literally meaning, "We are his slaves," and "he by whom we live," respectively. Both at once. That's not a contradiction. That's the same theological position the Sumerians took with Nergal and the Vedic priests took with Rudra. This force is not optional. You do not choose whether to acknowledge it. You only choose whether to do so with ritual or without. Now, cross the Atlantic entirely. Scandinavia. The Poetic Edda, specifically the Havamal, preserved in the 13th century from much older oral tradition. And Odin, not the popular culture grandfather figure, not the silver-haired king of Asgard, the one the actual texts describe. The runes did not reveal themselves to any but those who proved themselves worthy of such fearful insights and abilities. So Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil, pierced himself with his spear, and peered downward into the darkness below. He survived in this state, teetering on the precipice that separates the living from the dead for no less than 9 days and nights. No other god gave him food or a sip of water. He endured the full 9 days and nights without sustenance. not because he was performing strength, because the knowledge he was after could only be reached from the threshold between living and dead. That was the condition. When the runes finally appeared, Odin did not create them. He discovered them. In the mythic worldview of the Norse sources, the runes were not inventions. They were hidden patterns within the structure of the world, waiting to be understood. And Odin already knew where this was leading. The Prose Edda is explicit that Odin foresaw Ragnarok, the destruction of the gods, the end of the order he helped build, and pursued the hidden knowledge anyway. Not because he thought he could stop it, because understanding the structure of your own undoing was worth the cost of the ordeal. That is not a god of order. That is a god who understands something about order that the other gods cannot face. Now lay all five side by side. Nergal, Set, Rudra, Tezcatlipoca, Odin. There is no plausible contact corridor between Mesoamerica and Scandinavia. None. And yet every single one of these figures shares the same portfolio, existed before the current order was established, was never defeated but accommodated, holds knowledge the other gods cannot access, and demands fearful reverence rather than grateful worship. The lost civilization theory deserves a fair hearing here. The idea that one culture seeded all of these traditions before history began recording itself. It's not an absurd starting point, but the timelines don't align the way that theory requires, and the iconography diverges too sharply in surface form. The smoking mirror and the lion-headed mace are not the same object. The runes and the midsummer death sun are not the same symbol. What they share is not imagery, it's architecture. The same structural slot in every cosmology. The force that holds the whole thing together from underneath, that must be acknowledged, that cannot be eliminated. Which brings us to the only piece of evidence that actually stops me cold. As of 2025, archaeologists working at Göbekli Tepe in what is now southeastern Turkey are still finding carved iconography on pillars dated to at least 9,600 BCE. That is, before every civilization named in this script, before writing, before cities, before institutional religion of any kind. And the carved figures show predatory animals, watchful figures, something that observes from beneath the order of the world rather than above it. The same structural position, cut into stone by people who had no writing system with which to transmit an idea across an ocean. They apparently felt strongly enough about this particular concept to spend decades cutting it into rock anyway. The one attribute every version of this god shares across every ocean, every millennium, every language, is that he is never fully gone. He is given his mirror, his mace, his runes, his sacrificial year. He is accommodated. And the civilizations that built a dedicated place for the force of their own undoing are the ones that lasted. The ones that didn't are the ones we study in ruins. That's what they all knew. And now, you know what they knew. Subscribe if that pattern unsettles you the way it unsettles me.